In the 1970s, Melbourne faced a growing problem. After a multi-year drought, water storages had plummeted, and the city's water system, once praised as visionary, was under pressure. With projections of rapid population growth and limited rainfall, engineers and planners at the Melbourne Metropolitan Board of Works, the MMBW, once again were looking for bold solutions. And they believed they found them in the Yarra Valley. Two major dam proposals were put forward, one at Yarra Brae, along a tranquil bend of the Birrarung, also known as the Yarra River, near Christmas Hills, and another at Watson's Creek, nestled further north. Sugarloaf Reservoir was also included in the design, but envisioned to be a much smaller storage compared to the wider arrangement, and will likely serve only as a seasonal buffer to the treatment facility also proposed to be built. Together, these reservoirs promised security, capacity, and a grand engineering legacy. On paper, it was the next logical step in a century-long tradition of building water infrastructure to meet Melbourne's water supply needs. But these dams would never be built. However, in this bonus episode of my earlier water story series, it's key to acknowledge that they still played a part of Melbourne's water supply history. This is the story of two dams that were never built, where a quiet controversy played out in Victoria years before Tasmania's Franklin River campaign captured the country's imagination. It pitted engineering and planning ambitions against community values, conservation ideals, and a growing sense that our infrastructure needed to work with nature, not against it. Following the 1967 to 1971 drought, the board commissioned studies to identify future water storage sites. The Yarra Brae proposal was at the top of that list. A dam wall would be built just downstream of the current Bend of Islands conservation area, creating a reservoir approximately 20 kilometres long. It would have extended nearly to Yarra Glen, flooding both private land and ecologically significant bushland. At full supply level, the Yarra Brae reservoir would have submerged hundreds of hectares, requiring road realignments, property resumptions, and the displacement of entire communities. The Bend of Islands itself, a place of rare environmental character and already known for its low-impact lifestyle ethos, would have been partially inundated. Watson's Creek, meanwhile, was seen as a supplementary site. A 1971 report from the board indicated Watson's Creek as a strategically long-term storage option, with earlier concepts suggesting capacities of up to 350 gigalitres. Later assessments would scale this back to around 100 gigalitres, mainly as yield modelling showed Melbourne's entitlements on the Birrarung were insufficient to fill such a large storage alongside Sugarloaf Reservoir, which was also planned at the time. The public response came swiftly when the word began getting out. In 1972, local residents, conservationists, and even government planners themselves formed the Yarra Brae Action Group and the Bend of Islands Conservation Association. These were not fringe campaigners. They included urban planners, architects, ecologists, and even former public servants. Their argument wasn't anti-infrastructure, it was pro-balance. They believed water security was essential, but not at the cost of irreplaceable ecological and cultural values. The turning point came in 1974, when the MMBW released its environmental study of the Yarra Brae Sugarloaf area, an extensive investigation that acknowledged not only the environmental impacts, but also the significant social and economic costs of building the dam. For the first time in Melbourne's water planning history, an environmental study shifted the outcome of a major infrastructure decision. The study concluded that while Yarra Brae could technically be built, Sugarloaf on its own offered greater flexibility, lower environmental impact, and faster implementation. More importantly, it acknowledged the value of the local communities and ecosystems that would be lost. In its final decision, the Victorian government opted to cancel the Yarra Brae and Watson's Creek proposals. Instead, it committed only to building the Sugarloaf Reservoir along with the Yarra Gorge pumping station, to divert flows from the river during high flow periods. Sugarloaf became operational in the early 1980s and was paired with the Winnicki water treatment plant. Yarra Gorge pumping station, though less visible, became essential infrastructure, allowing transfers from the river and also Maroondah Reservoir via the former aqueduct to maintain storage levels during dry periods. It was, in effect, a more nimble and integrated approach to water management. As for Watsons Creek, the concept lingered in long-range planning documentation. It wasn't until 2012 that the site was officially retired, following a study that estimated its yield at just 3 to 21 gigalitres annually, at a cost of between 720 million and 1.2 billion. By then, Melbourne had embraced new tools: desalination, water recycling, and demand management. The land areas that might have become Yarra Brae Reservoir or Watsons Creek Reservoir were instead preserved or returned to local community. Today, Sugarloaf itself is more than a dam. It's a public park, a walking trail, and a conservation area. It embodies a new era of water planning, one that values flexibility, environment, and public engagement as much as technical capacity. The story of Yarra Brae and the Watsons Creek storages are not forgotten, even amongst those who once worked at the Melbourne Board of Works, or its successor, Melbourne Water. Although not as dramatic as the Franklin River controversy to follow some years later, Yarra Brae and Watsons Creek deserve a place in the city's collective memory. It was Melbourne's own Franklin moment. Quieter, less televised, and smaller, but no less significant. It marked the beginning of a shift in how we think about big infrastructure. That these systems must serve people, the end users, not just the systems they're immediately linked to. And that it must consider land and life, not just litres in a ledger. It also stands as a rare example of engineers and environmentalists, where they appear to have found common ground, listening, studying, compromising, and ultimately choosing a better path. We often celebrate what was built, but sometimes it's important to remember what wasn't. I'm Paul Michael Angus. Thanks once again for joining me.